Good morning. Welcome to Viking Preparedness. I am Pastor Joe Fox. Are we actually running? Yes, we are. This is like take 9, by the way. Today I want to talk about security. It's not going to be a religious video, but I am Pastor Joe Fox, right? Psalm 144 begins with, "Blessed be Yahweh, my strength," or the Lord, my strength. Another teaching for another time. "Who trains my hands for war and my fingers to fight." Blessed be the Lord for making me a warrior. Right? That's really what that's about. We cannot default to, all I need is Jesus, he'll protect me. What, do you think this training of your hands for war and your fingers to fight, do you think that's like the what was his name, Nemo, whatever it was in the Matrix, where he jacks in and all of a sudden he knows Kung Fu and Wushu and weapon skills? I mean, do you think that's how you're getting trained? No, you have to put in the effort just like anything else, right? There are a lot of people out there who like to default to that. I don't need anything but Jesus. I don't need to take action to prepare, whether that's to prepare to survive bad times because they think they're not going to go through bad times, because God knows no other Christians have ever gone through bad times, or that they don't have to fight because our fight is not of this world. We fight not against flesh and blood. That's a gross misunderstanding of what the word says. Your security comes down to you. The security of your family comes down to you. You are responsible. And to the degree that you take that responsibility seriously or not, that's going to have ramifications, right? I like saying we all make choices in life. Choices have consequences. Choose wisely. Told my kids that a lot. I was in the military for a little over 20 years. We lived in and around Army bases for all that time, for most of that time. And when I retired, we moved to the country. And we bought what has become known as High Prairie Acres, which is a house out in the boonies of Kansas. And there's lots of videos on my old site of it. When we bought it, it was a newish house on a piece of prairie, and not much else. At one time, it had belonged to a greater piece of land, like a couple hundred acres. And so when they fenced off the acreage that is High Prairie Acres and then brought the trucks in and stuff, they didn't even have a driveway down to the house. They just drove across the prairie, so there's like kind of a hard-packed clay mud. And the barbed wire fence that used to be part of this hundreds of acre of, ranch or whatever, the part for this piece, it was just down. Poles were out, and it was just laying on the ground, not even coiled well, and it had been there for a couple years, so prairie grass had grown up through it. And one of the first things we did was reestablish that fence. And I remember talking to my dad on the phone soon after we moved there, and he goes, "So what's it like?" And I told him, and he goes, "Does it have a fence?" And I said, "Yeah, it's got a fence all the way around it now. Joe and I just put up," that's my son, "we just put up the front part of it because it was down." He goes, "Oh, what kind of fence is it?" I said, "It's 6-strand barbed wire." And he was appalled, right? It's like, "What? You put barbed wire around your house? People are going to think you're a nut." I said, "No, man, everybody out here has barbed wire around their place. It's ranch country. There's cattle and stuff." And so it did not look out of place. If I'd have put up a wood fence or an iron fence or something like that, that would have looked out of place. And so we got that up, and then needed to put up a gate. I wanted a gate. And so I got 4 big fence posts. You know, they're about the size of telephone poles in diameter, and I don't know, 8 feet tall or something. And we dig these holes. Whoo! I know I've said before about the dirt is like chocolate cake and nice. Not where we had to put these in. It was like clay and rock. And so my son worked on it for a couple hours. And we got 3 holes dug, and we were working on the 4th. And again, we had just been in this house for a couple days. And I'm going somewhere with this. And this pickup truck pulls up. This old guy looks a little crazy. Leans out of the truck. He goes, "Y'all putting in a gate?" I'm thinking to myself, what's it look like? But I said, "Yes, sir." He looks at what we're doing. He goes, "Good idea." I put in that gate because a guy I worked with lived in the country, and I had been renting a house closer to town before we bought this house, and that's another long story, but he told me one of the first things you should do is put up a gate. I now tell people one of the first things you should do is put up a gate. That old guy then asked me, "You're using shovels to dig that?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." He goes, "You want a post hole digger?" And I was thinking the kind, I can't do it with my other hand because I'm holding a selfie stick, but you know, where you go down and then clamshell, like, you know, squeeze them together, lift it out and dump it, that kind of thing. And I hate those. I'm like, "No, we got it. We're almost done." He goes, "Well, I just live next door. I can get you a post hole digger." And then I'm thinking, okay, this is my neighbor who I haven't met. He wants to help me, so I have to be gracious and allow him to help me. So I said, "Sure, if it's not a problem." He came back with a gas-powered auger. I was thinking post hole digger because that's what he said. It was a gas-powered auger, which made short work of what else we had to do. That man ended up being a great neighbor. We love him, and he loves us, and that's just great. But putting up the gate. The guy I worked with who lived in the country said you need a gate, and I now tell people that. Security. Now, when you have a gate, I realize if you live in suburbia, most of the time you cannot have a gate, and if you did, it looks weird. I've seen people that have like race cars in suburbia that get one of those little like low gates that they lock kind of thing. It looks weird. But if you live out in the country, which you should, put a gate up. Now here's the thing on gates. You need to keep your gate shut all the time. If you only shut your gate when you're away from home, it becomes an indicator that nobody's home. So you need to get in the habit of stopping your car or truck, getting out, opening the gate, driving through, closing the gate, getting back in your car and parking. You need to do that all the time. And if you do that, people will soon become just aware that you have a shut gate. You don't have to necessarily lock it all the time, except when you leave, because no one can really tell that on a drive-by. They're not really looking that hard. And doing something as simple as that can keep the smash and grabs that typically happen in the countryside about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You can keep those down to a minimum. Nobody wants to be seen messing around with somebody else's gate. So gate, security. What about for most of you who live in suburbia? You live in a house on a quarter to a half acre. You are surrounded for miles by houses on a quarter to a half acre. What do you do? Sure, go ahead and do, and I'm not being sarcastic, I am saying sure, go ahead and do all those things you can see on all the YouTube channels and reading the magazines and the books about, you know, putting pins in your double hung windows and putting Charlie bars in your sliding glass doors and pinning them and all that stuff. That's all fine, but I'm not talking about security from a simple thief. I'm talking about security against the day when things get real, yo. What are you gonna need then? Think hurricane. You know, think shutters, real shutters that keep your glass from breaking, that keep the rock, the brick, or the Molotov cocktail from coming through your window if somebody wants to. You're gonna have to do shutters. Having shutters that have, you ever see the old cowboy movies and they would hold up in the house and they would shut the shutters and somehow 30 bullets wouldn't go through, or they would go through and not hit them? I don't know, whatever. But anyway, the shutters, when they were closed, had like a cross cutout. Well, that's so you can elevate your rifle up and down and left and right. Not a bad idea. and it still keeps things from breaking through the windows. You know, after the big one, you're not going to be able to replace your windows, so you really don't want that glass to break, and you want to keep people out. This is where people will say, yeah, and you should get RPG wire, like chain link fence. And okay, if they're shooting RPGs at you, you need to leave. Right? You need to be gone. But think about shutters. Think about the pre-work you can do now at your place to get a fence up. If you can have a fence, great. When I say if you can have a fence, I mean without looking like that guy. My son moved to eastern Kansas, and we went up to see him a little while ago, and as we're coming to the outskirts of the very tiny town in which he lives, there was a house. And I pointed at it and I told my wife, that guy is a survivalist and he might be a whack-whack, meaning a crazy person. Now this is out in the country, and for those of you who don't be out in the country, most people out in the country may have a chain link fence in the backyard if they have like dogs or something, and if they have a fence at all in the front yard, it's usually like that kind of barbed wire I'm telling you about, because it's like cattle fencing. But most houses don't really have a fence in the front. This guy had surrounded his house with, I don't know, 6-8 foot tall chain link around the whole house, not just the backyard, with the angled pieces of metal sticking out, which keeps people from coming over the wire, and he had razor wire on it. I mean, it's like, hello, over here. I know law enforcement knows he's there. I would. Who is that guy? And, you know, we drove by it at like 60 miles an hour, so I didn't really get a good look beyond that. But it's like, come on, you're making yourself a target. But to the extent you can, have a fence. Have a plan to quickly reinforce that fence. You could put up on your, let's say you have a wooden privacy fence in the backyard. A lot of people in suburbia have that. You could put now little metal brackets on your uprights, and heck, mount solar lights on them or something, or tiny little flags, or, you know, I don't know, whatever, or just put them up there and tell people you're trying to keep birds away. I don't know. But when the time comes, you could stretch barbed wire up there and wire it up there to put a barbed wire top on your fence to keep people from easily coming over. Now, you'd have to buy the barbed wire now, but you can do that. Barbed wire is easily available. Go to your local tractor supply store. And so you could do that, or you could put in a fence and think, when the time comes, I've got these bigger fence poles out behind the garage, and I'm going to put them in right next to these other fence poles and lift up my fence higher. But what you're trying to create is standoff, right? Remember, go back and look at my video, the D's of defense. I can't remember how many I gave you. I think it was 4 or 5. But you're trying to create a standoff with the people. You should definitely have a way to block your driveway from a vehicle. You know, you really cannot keep a motivated person out of anything. You can make them slow down and you can detect them as they're coming. But a motivated person, you can't keep them out with a 30-foot high fence, or wall for that matter. They can get through and across, but you can slow them down. You can do a pretty good job on vehicles. You can get steel cable. I'm not a steel cable guy, but, you know, roughly a 1/4 inch thick. And you can have a telephone pole mounted on each side of your driveway. Make them pretty and put birdhouses on top of them. Put eye bolts all the way through them. And pre-cut and pre-hook up your steel cable so that when the time comes, you can just click, or padlock. You know, you can build your own little loops in the end of the cable, and you can stretch that across your driveway. That'll keep a car from pulling right up to your house to unload, assuming you have some kind of fence or ditch with boulders reinforcing it or something that'll keep them from driving across your yard. Landscaping. You ever see those things? I bet you there's a term for it, where people build like the little raised mound in their yard, and then they'll cover it with mulch, and they'll plant different plants on it. It looks very pretty. And they'll put one here, and they'll put one here, and they'll put one there. You see it in nicer neighborhoods. Usually they're kind of kidney shaped. And it's a mound, I don't know, waist high. I look at those and I think fighting positions, right? You could put those in places in your yard where you could hide behind them to secure your place. So start thinking along those lines. Think about if there were 10 people, 15 people coming down your street bent on mayhem, and for whatever reason you're still there and cannot get away, how would you keep them off you, right? Again, all the little cutesy things, the little tripwire alarms that scream that are run by a 9-volt battery and all that stuff, that's all cute. I'm talking real security. I'm talking keeping people away. Talk about condition black a little bit. When things go bad, sometimes they go bad very quickly. And most people are playing catch up in their brain, and they don't catch up quick enough, which is why action beats reaction. There may come a time in times of chaos, God forbid, that you have to shoot somebody or somebody's. Well, heck, I know that. That's why I got an AR. That's why I got a handgun. That's why I have this, that, and the other thing. Okay. Bang, 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 bang. However many shots it took. You now have a dead person or dead people littering your lawn and hopefully not, but maybe your house. What now? Have you thought that through? Again, I'm going to the ultimate extreme. Katrina times 40. There ain't no police coming. There are no firefighters coming. This situation is not going to resolve itself for the next 30 days at the earliest. What do you do? Because dead bodies are unsanitary, and after a couple days, they stink. What are you going to do with them? Lots of things you can do with them. What if 30 days from this terrible tragedy, the rule of law and order is restored? You know, the government has huge plans. They have taken great steps to make sure they remain in power. I don't blame them. I would too. What if you think it's Armageddon and the end of the world, and, 30, 45 days later, they're recovering from that EMP, nuke strike, massive terrorist thing, whatever, and there's now cops again. Think about these things. Don't just assume. Don't assume that everything's going to be like it is today, and on that bad day, 3 days into this horrible time, don't think that it's always going to be like that. There will be a reckoning of one kind or another. So you need to think about that. It's fashionable to say in some circles, who are you hanging out with, Pastor Joe? It's fashionable to say, I would just take the dead body and hang it up on the tree with a sign around its neck. Yeah. You better hope that things don't go back to normal too quickly, or they're going to be coming for you, boss. You can't be doing that, right? Right? Keeping it real. But start giving real security a thought. If you do any kind of reading, assuming you don't have a background in this kind of thing, you are going to quickly find, here comes one of PJ's mantras, you're going to need people. Just securing a square house, at a minimum, assuming you don't have a tower sticking up out of the middle of the roof, at a minimum, it's going to have two positions. Because if you're in one corner of the house looking out, you can't see what's going on the other side of the house, right? So if you put two positions at diagonal portions of the house, you can see all the way around the house. So you have two people occupied on a guard duty. Well, you got to relieve them, right? They have to eat, sleep, and hopefully do something besides guard duty today. at a minimum, you're going to need 2 other people, but really, you're going to need 3 or 4 people per position to keep that manned. And that's not even getting to the point that really you don't want 1 person by themselves, you want 2, and It takes a lot of people to secure just 1 house when you don't know from what direction the bad guys are coming. And sure, there are ways to try and channel them and control that. I'm going to talk about something else here in a minute, but I just want to finish this thought. But you still have to have 360-degree security. So start thinking about people moving into your place and helping out with security. Or moving into somebody else's place and helping out with security. I've said this before in other videos, but if you ever look at a flock of geese on a golf course, there's always a couple that are just standing there looking. They're sentinel geese. If you look at photographs of Afghans and Pakistanis, Muj, sitting down to eat in a wide open plain, there's always at least one dude standing up, because now he's at 5 feet looking, scanning, while everyone else sits down to eat. Robert Rogers said, don't sit down to eat without posting guards. Gotta think about these things. All right, I'm switching gears completely because of an interesting conversation I had yesterday. And I had it a week ago, or a couple weeks ago. The sun, there's something wrong with it. I know. Well, Joe, we were talking about security. I know. I'm actually starting to think about start to wear long sleeves. This guy said to me the other day, you ever notice how plastic is starting to degrade a lot faster if you leave it outside now? I'm starting to worry about these things, right? I need to get that under some kind of cover. I said, yeah, my buckets have been cracking with alarming regularity that I just leave out. He's like, yep, there's something going on with the sun, the amount of stuff it puts out. Other people who study it, we have a brother here who's kind of like my go-to expert on it. And he actually has a device that measures, I don't know, UV rays or something. And before 10 used to be the highest that things would go and that people would say. And now it's up around 11, 12, 13, somewhere up there. It's higher. They've moved the scale now. Plants are getting blasted. It's been hot, right? You've seen me sweating and stuff in other videos, but it hasn't been super hot. It's been like, 95, which is hot, but it's not outrageous. It's not like 107, right? Check out my blackberry bush. You see all these dead and dying leaves and dried up blackberries that we failed to pick? Oh yeah. It's coming. All right, hey, think about security. Think about real security. Think about securing your place. Think about, times of lawlessness. And here's another thing. Not everybody's a lawless person. Out in the Old West, out in the frontier, people had lives, right? And visitors would come by. See it in the movies, it's probably very true. People usually answered the door with a gun in their hand. Are these visitors come to welcome us to the neighborhood, or are these people come to take what's mine? Start thinking big security thoughts. How are you going to secure your place? All right. Have a great day. I'll see you out there.